So what's put call parity for a stock with no dividends? Well, we have call minus a put is equal to what is the prepaid forward value of a stock? It's just a stock price. What's the prepaid forward value of an instrument that gives you K? It's just the T-bill price. So we can see that this is in fact the prepaid value of the stock at time zero. This is the prepaid value of K at time zero. So we can think of it that way. Now, what if we have dividends, discrete or continuous? What changes? Well, the prepaid value of the K doesn't change. That's still the T-bill. At time zero, we're going to pay the present value of K. But now, what's the prepaid value of a stock? What's the prepaid futures value, or the prepaid forward value of a stock with dividends? And the answer is, if there's discrete dividends, it's today's stock price minus the present value of dividends. And if it's a continuous dividend, it's the price of less than one share. It's the price of E to the minus delta T shares. So this prepaid forward idea just gives us the same idea, the same relationships we had earlier. But now let's think about a futures contract. It's a futures contract, so this is an option. These are options on a futures contract at time T with a strike of K. Well, the prepaid value of the strike is the same. It's just present value of K. What's the prepaid value of a futures contract? Well, it's the present value of the futures price. The reason is that a futures allows you to, in essence, buy the underlying at today's futures price. What will actually happen if you have a futures price, let's say that we have a futures today, it's time zero, we look at the futures price and say the S&P 500. And then we get to delivery, the futures price has changed to FT. Well, the point is, F0 is really what we're going to pay for the S&P 500. The reason is the transaction will require us to pay FT, but in our margin account, we're going to have a profit or a loss equal to FT minus F0. So the actual cost to us of buying the S&P 500 will pay FT, but the margin account will give us FT minus F0. So when I subtract that from my original cost, I go back to F0. So a futures contract locks in the price for delivery on the day that you enter into the contract. You actually will take delivery at a different price, but the margin account will give you the difference. So if I have a prepaid futures contract, I only need the present value of that F0. Why? Because I can accumulate interest on that, and so we see for futures contracts what put-call parity looks like. How about currency? Here is an example where I'm looking at calls and puts on a currency, say a euro. Well, the strike is K. The prepaid forward value of that is the same as before. And what's the prepaid value, prepaid forward value of 1 unit, say a euro? Well, what this formula tells you is X0 is the dollar cost of a euro. So let's say it's $1.30. I then can present value that with the foreign risk-free rate. The reason is that if I want a euro at time T, I can buy a euro today that costs me X0, $1.30 in my example. I invest it in a euro-denominated T-bill, it will grow to be 1 euro at time T. And finally, bonds is the same thing. It's going to be the initial bond price minus the present value of coupons, exactly the same way as with the stock and dividends. So this relationship, put-call parity, thinking in terms of prepaid forward prices, gives you a handy way of thinking through how these relationships work. And in any one of these cases, you can look at the version 1 or the version 2 portfolios and convince yourself that if you bought the securities implied by these equations, they would have the same payoffs at time t, and consequently portfolios will have the same prices at time 0.